It's been a few days since I sat down to play Davey Wreden's new game, The Beginner's Guide. I honestly wasn't planning for his work to make an appearance on my channel, but when I finished it, I felt overwhelmingly compelled to share both the experience of the game and my own personal reflections and explorations of this incredibly fruitful and pregnant narrative. If you haven't seen my playthrough, that's okay. I basically just let it speak for itself whilst I quietly guided everyone's attention to little things here and there that I thought were particularly important. But if you haven't experienced the game either personally or vicariously, I would strongly encourage you to do so. So I've let the experience settle in the back of my head. I'm not the kind of person to immediately jump to writing after watching or reading or playing through something. I prefer to take the time to quietly digest it and process my thoughts, and there is a lot to process here. The first question that propelled itself forward for me is one that I've seen quite a few other people raising and discussing, so it is the first we will address: the question of Coda. Is Coda real? The narrative just seems so neat. Each of his games that we play through seem to progress one into the other so organically that it's hard to imagine that they were otherwise intended. Everything is so transparently and unsubtly loaded, so seductive and compelling and effortless to analyze. It's like every hack games journalist's wet dream. It turns out, at least in the narrative, that these meanings which are so ready to jump out of Coda's work are misplaced. It seems so obvious to Davey, and I dare say to most people playing, that these scenes are products of a shaken and disturbed mind, of loneliness and creative starvation. Most of the time we're playing through this, all we're really interested in is reading Coda. And as we find out in the tower, we're wrong. There is no illness or self-harm here, it's all projected by the narrator. It's an extreme case, but Davey has gone so far in pursuit of this cannibalistic obsession with finding, exposing, and devouring the soul of the creator that he has crippled Coda. I'd like to plant an idea here, and I will come back to it later. It doesn't matter whether Coda is real or not. It is an interesting question, and one that I think is worth talking about, whether he's real, whether he's an invention of Davey Wreden or even an aspect of Wreden himself. These are fruitful discussions, but the truth of the matter is not essential. And the hunt for the true Coda will distract and narrow our appreciation for the Beginner's Guide as much as it did the narrator Davey's appreciation for Coda's games. But let's examine the analytic instinct that drives this obsession. For all the history of the written word with which I'm familiar, and even today, most readers, even professional readers that give themselves titles like critic or reviewer and presume to be better at discerning meaning than others, almost everyone approaches artistic and literary objects in the same way. Because if you see something in a game or a book or a film or a painting that wasn't consciously and deliberately put there, you must be mistaken. You must be talking shit, right? So when you do see something there, you want to know that the composer intended it, because that confirmation will somehow make it legitimate. Well, I'll give you an allegory. In 1963, a high school student named Bruce McAllister mailed a survey to a number of notable novelists questioning the conscious intent and methods of symbolism in their work. Those that categorically denied consciously placing any kind of symbols in their work included Jack Kerouac, Isaac Asimov, and Ray Bradbury. Does this mean that the works of these writers are devoid of symbolism and the meaning which attends it? You might say, but there's the subconscious and the preconscious of the creator. Surely, if we're clever enough, we can work back through not only what they intended, but also what and how they think and feel, what causes them joy and pain and passion and fear and rage, and then we can box in their soul with no chance to protest or escape. Yes, all of this in a little takeaway box, and then we can gorge ourselves on it until we're all happily bloated and sick. Let's say we do this. Let's say we perfectly discern and catalogue everything that the creator places in their work, both consciously and subconsciously. We've learned everything about the creator and nothing about ourselves. Are we done? Do we stop there? Do we throw everything else out and move on? Have we gained everything we can from the work? These are, of course, hypothetical questions, but I hope you can see why they need asking. The truth is, many, if not most critics still subscribe to this attitude. They cannot or will not take responsibility for their own compulsions. They run and hide. Like our narrator Davey, they would sooner proclaim that they have found the author buried in the viscera of a work than concede that they have in fact found a grubby little mirror. In this, I see equal measures of arrogance and cowardice. This attitude does not only affect the potential value and impact of a piece of work, it also affects the creator. If the reader or viewer or player sees something shitty or abhorrent in your work, they may well decide that you're a shitty or abhorrent person. This is what Davey did to Coda in the extreme, and to be fair, Coda offered material to encourage it in the extreme. But I'm quite certain that this is an anxiety which attends everyone that publishes or publicly displays their work pretty much all the time. When you're intimate with your audience, not only can they potentially find all of your own real weaknesses and insecurities as they dig around, they'll also blame you for their own damn reflection and all the shitty things they find out about themselves. Unless you're a narcissist or some kind of magical self-motivating machine, enough of this pressure will cause you to withdraw in order to protect yourself, and you'll start resenting your audience. The quality of your work will suffer, and you'll stop feeling satisfied with what you produce because it's no longer personal, it's cold and reluctant and contrived. The hunger for self-expression which used to drive you will remain unsatisfied, and you will no longer have the inspiration or the confidence to satisfy it. Coda sees this happening in his work, so he shuts down before it can completely destroy his creative integrity. The Tower, chillingly resembling something out of Terry Gilliam's Brazil, is an exercise in Würfel-Dunks-effect, an estrangement, a barrier to empathy and emotional identification with Coda designed to distance the player. It splashes icy cold water in Davey's face and forces him for the first time to engage intellectually rather than emotionally, and prepares him to accept Coda's final maxim. On the other end of the spectrum, people might see something in your work that they think is profound and brilliant and so far above what you expected of it, and they decide once again that their experience is not a conversation but a dictation, and the creator is therefore profound and brilliant. The Davey Wreden of Davey Wreden's public interviews and posts, not to be confused with the narrator Davey Wreden, and definitely not to be confused with the little Davey Wreden homunculus in the back of Davey Wreden's head telling him Davey Wreden only knows what. He talks about this and the kind of depression it unearthed in him. He lost ownership of the Stanley Parable to the millions of people consuming it. His personal feelings and thoughts about the game became dwarfed by those of players and critics. They praised it and awarded it and superimposed everything they read in it onto Wreden himself, and his own thoughts about his work became confused and lost. All he had to sustain himself was the opinions of others, and so these opinions became an obsession and his insecurities began to consume him. So how do you follow up from that? How do you continue working and expressing yourself knowing that the next thing you publish could easily fail to meet all of those millions of expectations and uncover you as some kind of fraud? The answer seems to be that you can't work at all again until the thirst for validation starts to recede. So perhaps Coda is Wreden's way of soliciting sympathy for creative anxiety, given that depression is something far more approachable for a player to see imposed upon a creator than brilliance or genius would be. Or perhaps Coda and Davey are both exactly who they seem to be in the narrative. I say again that the truth here is not essential, because both of these readings are extremely valuable, and neither of them should be excluded from our consideration. Finally, I've been talking all this time about how a player or reader or critic should take responsibility for what they see reflected in a game like this, and yet I've spent most of this time talking about Wreden, Coda, and the nameless typical critic. The reason this game affected me and so many other people is that it solicited a personal response, and I think it would be unfair of me not to now share that response. Creative anxiety is something that has personally plagued me for a long time. I remember being 17 years old and my English teacher approaching me over the content of a piece of creative writing I'd submitted about the condition of a former and recovering child soldier in Sierra Leone, who was criminalized for acts they had been forced to commit under the coercion of drugs, and violence, and suffering from severe psychological duress. So my teacher insisted that I receive counseling. And it was at that point I realized that a writer will always be forced to take responsibility for what is read. This was by no means the last time I was to have this kind of experience with a mentor or a friend with whom I'd shared my work. If I publish something of my own creation, something that I really pour myself into, its flaws and shortcomings are my flaws and shortcomings. Or if people think it's brilliant and I ever again fail to meet this expectation, I'm forever a fraud. But when I write critical or analytic pieces, or when I tell someone else's story with my own voice or flavor, I can inject some creative expression into it and release pressure from that valve without having to take responsibility for the way it is received. After all, I'm just the messenger, right? I do write scraps of my own original short stories and dialogues and such, but the only things I'm secure and brave enough to publish here for you are explorations and retellings of work that is not my own, and even then I can only do so under a pseudonym. Furthermore, the confidence that people see in me through what I do here is a product of contrivances. When I started this channel, I had to force myself to adopt the attitude that near enough is good enough, and basically force myself not to over-edit or second-guess anything that I write, so that if people decide that it's shit, I'll always have an excuse to hide behind that, well, I only had a few hours to spend on it, and I didn't put in 100%. Given the time restraints that you have to place yourself under when creating content for YouTube, this is a pretty easy excuse to justify. So playing through the beginner's guide made me reflect on the past several months of my own life, how I'd been suffering from a long depression myself, and after the death of a close family member, basically threw out everything that I'd been doing and started searching for a new project that could somehow reinvigorate me and turn a page. You can see the results of that here. I started writing, recording ideas about my own favorite mode of escapism, and it was the feedback and validation of viewers that kept me pursuing it. Eventually, that assurance that I'm somehow good and clever and valuable has been overtaken by other motivations, that I'm entertaining and challenging people, giving a platform for interesting discussions, and that I'm developing skills and making new contacts and so on. But I think the initial driving force for pretty much everyone is that insecure thirst for validation. You can be damn sure we're not doing it for the paltry income it generates, or 99.99% of us would have given up on YouTube a long time ago. Now, I know I'm being self-indulgent here, but many people have pointed out already that the beginner's guide seems to be a pretty self-indulgent game. Either way, I know that the self-reflection it compelled in me is something that a lot of other people have experienced after playing or watching this, and maybe giving voice to my own experience will make some of you feel emboldened or challenged by yours. To me, this game is rich and pregnant and important. It is the gaming equivalent of Francis Bacon's study after Velázquez's portrait of Pope Innocent X, or of Pink Floyd's The Wall. As a result, there are of course a million things worth talking about that I haven't managed to discuss here, and I think that's great. I hope to see more challenging work from Wreden and his Galactic Cafe in the future. I hope you all at least found this reflection interesting and engaging and wouldn't mind seeing more content like this here from time to time. If you do mind, well, a new episode of Abridged will be up tomorrow, so I hope we can still be friends. Feel free to leave your thoughts below, tweet at me or email me at ethysffxiv@gmail.com. But for now, thank you so much for watching.